A recent Canada-wide survey by the University of Saskatchewan suggests people are becoming more divided on issues like COVID-19 and politics. The National Phone Survey by the Canadian Hub for Applied and Social Research suggests some Canadians are even reducing contact with friends or family. Jason Disano, research director of the survey, says people's answers were largely influenced by their political leaning. He says identity politics taking hold in the U.S. are now carrying over into Canada. Mr. Disano joins us now. Sir, welcome back, or welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So let's start with unpacking this survey's main findings for our viewers.
Yeah, so for this particular survey, we asked a number of questions around the extent to which Canadians are becoming more divided around a number of different issues. And we got some pretty interesting findings, findings that in some respects are actually a bit surprising and perhaps equally disturbing. So 3/4 of those who were surveyed, and this was a survey that we conducted in early March of 1,000 Canadians coast to coast, 3/4 of those surveyed, so 3 out of 4 Canadians indicate that we have become more polarized as a society over the last year. That's a pretty significant majority of Canadians who feel as much. We also asked questions around the extent to which Canadians feel we've been united or divided amongst a number of different issues. The COVID pandemic and the recent fall federal election were most likely to be cited as Canadians in this particular survey as issues that have served to divide Canadians coast to coast. So 73% of those who were surveyed cited the federal election as something that's divided Canadians. And 72% of those who were surveyed cited the COVID-19 pandemic as something that has served to divide Canadians. Another finding that was perhaps surprising and again a bit disappointing was 40% of those surveyed, so 2 out of 5 Canadians indicated that they have reduced contact with a friend or family member over the last year. And most commonly that was due to either differing views or opinions related to the pandemic or politics.
Some very interesting findings there. So what led to conducting a survey on Canadian unity in the first place, sir?
Yeah, so we actually conducted a very similar survey for CBC News here in Saskatchewan back in December, and that survey garnered some pretty interesting results. And we thought it would be really interesting to roll out similar questions on a national scale to see what sort of results we're able to generate. And the time when we were sort of considering sort of the questions we were going to ask for this next quarterly iteration of the national survey, so the whole trucker convoy thing was going on in Ottawa, and it seemed a really appropriate time to go ahead and ask questions like these around sort of the extent to which we're becoming more polarized or divided as Canadians.
And did the answers maybe differ depending on the region or province these questions were asked?
Yeah, we did see a number of significant differences by region of the country. So, for example, those of us in the prairie provinces, so that being Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, were more likely, for example, to identify that issues around fighting climate change were more likely to divide us as Canadians. Things like the assault weapons ban was more likely to divide Canadians. Those in Quebec were less likely than other regions of the country to have reduced contact with a friend or family member because of a differing view or opinion. So there were certainly a number of regional differences that we saw across the country.
And it seems that politics and COVID-19 were the top of the list nationally. So what does this say of the influence of politics and the pandemic in recent years?
I would suggest the results that we see coming out of a survey like this definitely tend to go in lockstep with sort of the population in the various regions of the province. So, some of the examples that I was citing a few moments ago or a few minutes ago around sort of the, views and opinions on the prairie provinces around sort of unites us versus divides us. We tend to see sort of a general alignment of people's views and opinions on some of these issues in relation to sort of political leanings of the various regions of the country. So, for example, the prairie regions tending to be a bit more sort of conservative leaning, central Canada, Ontario, Quebec tending to be a bit sort of moderate in its views. So the results that we see this particular survey do tend to align with sort of views and opinions of folks living in the various regions.
All right, sir, a quick 30 seconds left here, but since you mentioned this is a similar situation in the U.S., can policymakers maybe learn from patterns in the U.S.?
I think the extent to which we're seeing sort of increases in divisions, and we've always been divided as Canadians. I mean, we've been divided going back many, many years. But I think those divisions have been amplified by the pandemic. And I think the extent to which those divisions have also become sort of more obvious and apparent have been amplified in the last 2 years through things like social media and the like. We see, for example, those divisions being sort of weaponized or used as a political tool in the United States. And I think we're moving increasingly in that direction as well here in Canada, where sort of divisions amongst individuals are actually being used as a political tool.
All right, Mr. Disano, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
My pleasure. Thank you.